Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the special meeting of council for Monday, April the 7th, 2025. And just so that everybody knows, there is a link on the City of Trail website that you can join the webinar on today. The first item is to call the meeting to order, and then I would ask for adoption of the agenda, please. Thank you, Councillor Martin and Councillor Wilson. All those in favor? That was carried, thank you. And on to item number 3, which is the general government and finance. And today we will be discussing the operation budget for 2025. And I will hand it over to Mr. McClure.
Okay, thank you, Mary Jones, and thank you, council, for allowing me to interrupt your regular scheduled Monday nights that aren't regular council meetings with this special one. Last time we had discussed, we kind of had looked at where the number was sitting as far as the shortfall that we had in our operating budget. And I went back and we did some other tweaking, looked at some numbers. You can kind of see where it's come in. It's a bit lower than it was before, which is a good news story. And we'll discuss that in a bit. But there's a couple things up front that I was wanting to kind of talk about with council, just on direction. We did receive, and there was a presentation back in 2024 at the end with the Trail Arts Council and with BISAC. And part of it was, hey, you know, what would be helpful for our groups is that if we sort of knew that we were, there was a commitment. There was a commitment for a dollar amount. And when I went back and looked at what council has provided, certainly, you know, you already have your grant and aid. So if you wanted to say, we're going to commit, and they provided a letter for some of the requesting on what they've had. If you want to commit that money, I would say to you, that's not new money because you've already been sort of incorporating inside your grant and aid, but it would be saying, okay, the grant and aid's this, but we are going to pull this amount out for the next 3 years for the 2 groups that have brought that forward. So I'm just looking for, I guess we talked about a motion as far as sort of setting them up for a 3-year commitment. I don't know if anybody has any questions on the letters. I know that I think in the past and with some of the changeover with the Arts Council and with BISAC, they likely would have been coming in probably more in this time of the year, or maybe even a bit earlier usually, to kind of get their annual funding. And then with everything that happened with the transition, they ended up kind of coming late in 1 year. Council provided them funding, and then again kind of came in late last year. And I think they want to get in front of this, sort of that allows them to make sure that the programs that they are working on have funding ahead of them, and so that there isn't sort of that scarcity mentality as they turn the corner. And I think, as again I mentioned, they had discussed this with council a couple of times, and I wanted to make sure I didn't miss it and bring it forward.
Any comments, questions or comments on that, Councillor Hanson?
I think, you know, I understand that they use the funds that are secured to leverage additional funds.
Mhm.
So I think having some sort of commitment for a certain amount of time frame just gives them that clarity operationally and what they have, and knowing that, you know, we very much value, you know, the arts and cultures and the tourism opportunities it provides in our community. And so, you know, I think having a set grant that an operating fund that they get to move forward for the next 3 years, it gives us a line item that is not fluctuating and coming back and asking us all the time for it, but we just have, here's the amount you get. This is it. Don't come and ask for more. We know what it is going forward for this, you know, window of time. We have, you know, certainty, and they have certainty. So I think having a 3-year time frame makes a lot of sense.
Any other comments? I have to agree with Councillor Hanson. I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Only because they know for planning ahead. And I think Councillor Hanson also mentioned that if they know that they've got that 3-year plan ahead of time, they can actually apply for more government grants. And the service that they provide and the people that bring into town, the economic development that they create because of the shows that they put on and the work that they do in the community and the difference they make in our downtown area. I just think it's really, really important to make sure that we can support them in any way that we can and make sure that it's consistent funding. Excuse me, for 3 years. I think that's really important. And just on the BISAC side, I know from sitting on the board that they do struggle for funding right now. And having this consistent funding that they know that's going to be there for 3 years again. It also provides them the opportunity to create new programs, to apply to the government for extra funding. I just think it's a really good idea and I like the accountability that it provides as well. So I'm going to support the motion, whoever makes the motion. When it comes forward, I just think it's a good idea. Okay, any other comments?
And
Go ahead.
Just a point of order, are we putting a motion on the floor?
I thought you had written one down.
Yeah,
believe
but somebody
so.
needs to put.
I know.
Okay,
May I suggest a motion that could be appointed to, yes, so. The council directs staff to include a 3-year funding agreement in the amount of $30,000 per year to the Trail and District Arts Council for the years 25, 26, and 27 into the 25 to 29 financial plan.
can we add the BISAC gallery in there as well?
So it is for the Trail District and Bizac Gallery?
There's two, and so just make sure that we've got both of their requests included on that.
Okay, so we're doing a
I mean, that
30,000.
would be one to do that one separately is.
I
totally
suggest that
possible.
those are two separate
Okay.
motions.
Okay.
I'm saying, yeah.
Okay. So I'll make the motion for the Trail and District Art Council. Counselor Butler, second. All those in favor? Thank you, that was carried. And who would like, is there any question on the BISAC gallery request as well? No, okay. Is there anyone that wants to make the motion?
Shall I read out his motion? And I do believe, just for clarification, this is in the amount of 10,000?
That's
Yes.
correct.
Okay. The council directs staff to include a 3-year funding agreement in the amount of $10,000 per year to the Bicyc Gallery for the years 2025, 26, and 27 into the 2025 to 2029 financial plan.
Counselor Martin, Counselor Hanson? All those in favor? Thank you, that was carried.
And just again, so just for the public and for council's sake, that this won't change the budget. It is just being an allocation of the funds that council's already been providing annually. Now, I think, we didn't got it late on the weekend, but I know the council was emailed it here. I don't necessarily have the letter, but just wanted to confirm with council that inside this budget already was the 145,000 for CIB.
Mhm.
So, as they had noted, they had provided a long letter on the activities that they're performing. And so I just wanted to confirm with council that that was already in the budget and the council is, in approving when we get to the 5-year financial plan, it's already in there. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about the letter to discuss, but certainly the dollar amount that they've requested is included currently.
Yes, through the chair, just a question on, I guess, on the process of grant approvals. So maybe I need some education on this. So grants usually come in November for the year, for this year. We didn't see any kind of paperwork on this until Sunday when Mr. Roadley submitted it. So there was a presumption, correct me if I'm wrong, that we were going to be approving it. Is that the case, or how does it work for, like, what is our procedure on how do we approve these kind of budgets?
Great question, and certainly been trying to work with the group. We've talked about their structure that they have. And I feel quite comfortable that we will have a result starting into the future years. But my expectation would have been that we would have been approached earlier in the budget season. I know that they've been trying to work through the questions that council have put back to them as to whether or not they're a society, whether or not they're going to be a subcommittee. I guess am I correct on that, Council Butler or GM Butler? society, or they would be is it a subcommittee of council? It's a
select committee.
a select committee of council. Haven't got quite there. We know that they need to order our flowers earlier. They've been in the system for quite a while. This isn't the first time they've been asked sort of, what's their proper setup for them. But we know or feel very comfortable with staff and with the work that we're doing with this important group in our community, that we will have an answer, and that the expectation is that we will be rolling into 2026 budget with a number ahead of time to be able to discuss. And then going forward, that would be my expectation, is that it's earlier, much earlier in the budget, not that you're getting these sorts of items at so late in the year, and also recognizing, yes, that they need to purchase the flowers that they use, that we would commit the funding towards doing that earlier.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
I guess my question isn't really so much budget related, it's just, from thinking of our community safety task force having Arlene in and talking about, fire smart. Principles and just ensuring, like, I think it would be a good practice for them to touch base with her. Specifically, they talked about the mulch, and that was highlighted on her presentation. Right. So that was just what I.
Took out from that kind of linking the two, right? And then this is where I would be helpful. And I know in the past they have come and honored their volunteers, and this year that didn't happen. I don't know if it was part of the concern over how the city was asking them about whether or not they're gonna be a society or a select community council and that sort of thing. But a lot of these, I'm expecting that, give them the grant. It's not like we just don't see them for X amount. It's, we expect to have them kind of come and report out to us. And CIB would be one of them, and they have done that in the past. So this year's been a bit more challenging than others, but our expectation is going forward. And that would also, I think, allow for that communication, even for someone like yourself, Councilor Benson, that's kind of tying together what you heard a community task force and saying, have you guys spoken with, or what's the connection there, and trying to get them together. Sometimes it's a little bit harder as we're so late. That spring is around the corner, and that's not ideal, but CIB is has been in place for a number of years. So, but certainly as a staff, we'll see if there's a connection there.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Council, for discussing that. So I'm going to move on to sort of the summary page for our operating budget. And you'll notice that the previous time we had a number of lines under rows 71 to 74, and then also down in 97 to 100. Good thing we did get the information from CIB, and that there is no change there. I don't know yet, but still haven't heard anything. We talked about the last meeting where we talked about bylaw staffing and how we were going to look at opportunities for using our staff currently that we have, maybe allowing some overtime to be able to look at some of those challenging periods if we're having them. So far, it's been quiet recently. That doesn't mean that it doesn't flare up all of a sudden if we get good weather again. So those numbers, we had numbers in them before. Those have since been pulled out, put into the upper rows under the expenses that they relate to. And you can see at the end of now we're looking at 637, basically $638,000 shortfall. That's currently where we would be sitting based on this budget today. So now I'm going to just go through my presentation just so that kind of keep that in mind. And the budget is such a living document in a sense. So a couple of things that I want also to reiterate that I haven't maybe in the past is that the budget is mandated to be passed and approved by May 15th. Of course, we're in a much better place here where we're getting a number. We'll have the budget presentation. We'll have opportunity for the community to make comments, and then we'll be bringing that forward as far as the tax rate bylaw and the 5-year financial plan will be coming at the end of April and likely adopted at the I think it's May 12th meeting is what my plan would be. And yet we've started this back in November. because we kind of parcel it out. We were dealing with utilities, we deal with utilities early because we know that we want to have the rates in time so that we can get the invoices out, allowing our community members as much time as possible to get their payment in before we end up with the penalty or I guess I should say the discount, losing the discount. So that's where we're at. We've talked about capital and we're in a comfortable place there. And then we were in the general and, again, general probably a little bit later than I would like, but as I kind of talked about before, we completely revamped the account structure. And so it's been a bit difficult just on mapping out all of the previous accounts to the new accounts and the different budget amounts as they've been laid. Now, we had met a couple of weeks ago. Council was gracious on providing some of the feedback on being willing to use some of the COVID funding, putting towards some of the local government climate action plan funding towards a new manager of planning, we've got IT assessment work, and we also got succession planning. So those funding pieces were there. We obviously, council was okay with the new sidewalk for the and we also had the ask for a bit of an additional funding for the trail historical society. So we've kind of done that. All the other components that we had are basically the regular services that we're currently charging out to the public. So as part of this process, as we go on to the next page here, so I should maybe share my screen. Yeah, yeah.
Are you able to share your
I
screen?
can, yes, thank you. Thank you for the reminder.
Through the chair, just for clarity, do you want us to ask questions throughout or wait till the end?
Sorry, please ask questions as we go through. Yeah, that would be great. So, we can the document. Okay, there we go. Thanks for your patience. There we go. Okay. So just introduction, as I was talking about budget and where we're at and the time frame that we go through this budget. Talking about our 2024-2028 financial process. Again, council may get tired, but the quick facts. Our 2025 budget overview, taxation and the operating budget. And then again, it says questions at the end, but as Councilor Benson said, if I've got a question, please raise your hand or please interrupt me. As we move on to the next stage, kind of here's this arrow pointing at today. Because Carbonville staff have prepared the budget, finance staff have looked at it. We've had some presentations to council. Now we're looking at sort of what's the proposed tax rate. Budget presentation, I would hope that based after this meeting that we would move forward with that probably on the evening of the 14th. As a agenda item on our council meeting, and that would be the public consultation component. And we'll have some time frame from there, basically a month until we have to pass it, but see what feedback we get. Okay, so in the current year, our quick facts, we've got about 31 million in revenue. Our total operational expenses are 16.6, and we understand that there's a difference between that two, but those revenues over expenses go to pay down debt, and they also flow into our reserves. Right now, you know, the operational expenses and allocation to reserve is about 21 million, and that's funded with about 16.5 million in taxation, so a 1.3 to 1 ratio. It's actually much better than most entities where a lot of times they will be even 2 or 3 times. And so meaning that if you have a 1% increase, say an inflationary increase in your operating expenses, you're having to increase your taxes by 3 times the amount to get to some of those numbers. So you can see our 69 regular full-time employees. We do have some part-time, obviously with guards, a number of them with aquatic staff, which are in good use. And we have some from the Trail Aquatic Leisure Center janitors and our exempt airport manager as well. So in talking about 2024 and some of the positives, as I kind of related this to where the pressure from inflation and collective agreement increases was offset. And one of the major ones was that we did see, you know, a real positive improvement at the Trail Memorial Center, especially with the new kids rink in place. We're seeing some good rental revenue there. But on top of that, and from what I can see historically, you know, more room, more rentals of the kitchen, you know, and a space to be able to use that. The council of the day, I guess the previous council was able to get a grant to upgrade the Victoria View room and change that out because the library and all that moved up. So we are seeing increased revenue as people are renting that. We remember in our capital budget that we put some funding inside the capital to be able to upgrade the IT audiovisual equipment so that as we get more people renting it, that we'll be able to take on and provide a better service there for those that are wanting to have conferences or meetings. So that's a positive result. So on the harder side there was that Tech was successful in their BC assessment appeal, and those are for the years 2019 to 2022. But since we are already in 2024 at the time of the assessment, they don't go back. I mean, they go back in the sense that they calculate what that difference would be, but they can only take it out of the current year, and it creates a credit for Tech. And so, but that's one of the draws down on taxes even for this year, for 2024, was the credit back to Tech. Oops, sorry.
And so does this mean that if they're not satisfied with their values for 2023 and 2024, they could then appeal again?
Tech has an ongoing appeal. They appeal every year, basically. So it's just sort of automatic, which isn't uncommon with some large entities. A lot of times you will see that happen, and then whatever factor when it comes to talking with the appeal board, they either move forward or they decide that they withdraw it. But yeah.
No, just.
Yes, no, it's a great question. Absolutely. This year was super unique in the RCMP for me, in that we improved the number of members that we've been having. So we have been in that high 7s, low 8s members out of 14. And but the overtime, there was overtime, but it was not what we saw this year. And this year we had averaging about 10.5 members, but the overtime was astronomical. As I've tried to sort of ask some questions, and I've heard that there's some changes in the collective agreement that if someone is coming for overtime, that they get paid from the moment they sort of leave their location until they return, and that the cost of hotel and food and all that is also included. And my understanding is that we had some of those situations, so even though they may not have been working, they were traveling back and forth because they're usually coming from the Lower Mainland or even the island. And so the hope is obviously for 2025 is that we are back to our actual membership and we're not needing to use members for overtime. So, but where in the past there has been a significant surplus, this year's there is an actual being over budget by about $175,000. That was significant. Now, some of the things as we go down to the next line, and no surprise on council for this year and last year, is that we've had another, you know, a low snow year. And I kind of repeated this, but we don't lay off any staff in that situation, but we do put them towards, I would say, higher valued work, and that they can get the parks going sooner, work on other areas of the city. Yes, it is valuable to plow snow. I'm not saying it's not, but if we don't have it, it's not. It's a good time to be able to use that manpower to get on some projects that we haven't and move them up the priority lists. And you know, we know pushing the snow keeps people safe, but it also just melts at the end of the day. So building permit revenue, we're under budget again this year. And expectation though, sort of seeing some improvements in that in 2025. So hoping that we kind of hit our budget, which is not a huge amount. We've kind of kept it pretty manageable, so it's not a huge effect on the numbers. But our business license revenue was over, and so I think that's again a testament to the number of businesses in town, moving to town. And so that's a good news story, I think, for your community, that you're also seeing small businesses coming in and getting their business licenses. Again, pretty impressive at the Trail Aquatic and Leisure Center. We had, speaking about having to fill in locations because they'd already sold out their swimming lessons in 10 minutes. Well, that's even a current year kind of issue. But last year you can see that we ended up being $200,000 higher in revenue than what we had budgeted. That's a significant amount of money. And again, when you lay out the good work that was done by previous staff on getting our lifeguards back in place, get out of COVID, being able to work with Roslyn and getting that TRP agreement removed, really saw a real increase in usership and to a point where sometimes you get to a place where it's almost too good of a good thing, where you get that diminishing returns where you get so busy and then you start adding another staff member, but you're only taking care of only a certain other number of more people. So it's one of those places right now where we seem to be right at the perfect sweet spot. So that was one of the things that certainly, in looking at what we budgeted for in 2025, was to increase that, but not, go over and above.
I was just going to ask that about, hours of operation and, as some gyms have shifted out there in the public, is there an opportunity to investigate or do a trial of being potentially open a bit earlier for people to attend
Right.
before they go to work?
Yeah, great questions. And that was also one of the components that maybe breezed by, but there was from our gym coordinator, additional equipment asked for some of those reasons, to be able to add some equipment that we believe will be attractive for those that maybe are looking for another place to work out at, and then obviously being able to have full facility there. So those are certainly things that are being worked on. We unfortunately have our major talc manager has been off with some knee surgery, and so I know that she's wanting to get back. And so those will be some good questions, especially when they come in and visit and talk to us on a monthly basis as to how are things going. But we are also seeing that reaction of, hey, not great. I mean, it's great that you can sell out all your swing lessons in 10 minutes, but when you've got that much demand and you've got parents that want to get in there, so I was really pleased to see them finding a way to use the schedule to their advantage and be able to increase the number of kids and adults that want to get swing lessons. And I'll also be quite curious to hear back when they talked about the sensory swing and what that looks like for people as well.
Yeah, it's just through the chair. I just want to cycle back to the RCMP.
Yes.
$175,000 door. Is it possible to get an accounting on how much overtime is actually spent? How much of that is overtime? I know we're over budget by $175,000, but how much of it is overtime? Is that possible?
I will tell you, because part of it's a little bit hard, Councilor Cashflow, because the year ends are not coterminous, and what that means is that yes, it's sort of like embargo, but different. Is that the city is on a December 31st, whereas the province and RCMP are on March 31st. So sometimes we're always doing this sort of game, and they do the reconciliation at the end. But what I'll tell you is, it's a great question, because it's really quite staggering to me. But so when we got our last invoice, Councillor Cashel, so our budget was for 14 officers. The expected per capita budget amount was $231,000 per officer. That put us in a budget of about $3.2 million for our officers. The overtime was at about $113,000 was the budget, and now that added up to, for manpower, if we were to have had, full complement of 3.3 million at 100%. Now, municipalities of our size, we pay 70. So our budget was about 2.34. And averaging right now FTE, 10.26 the per capita has gone up per officer, 245, and a lot of that, just to be clear, it's not just wages, that's about paying for the gas for the police cruiser, to buy new cruisers. You need sometimes new guns, there's new breathalyzers coming, yeah. So at that amount, we're at 2.522 million, was our kind of forecasting for our year, and for our members are 10.26. Our overtime and reservists was at $821,000. So, really, that's where we're getting it. Now that even on the 821, we do get a break that the government picks up 30% of that,
Right.
but still we're at 70%. So we've been being billed for about 113, or yeah, so let's make that even less than that, because of our 30%, we're in the $80,000 range, and we're looking at 500,000 in overtime. Now, again, that gets reconciled as of March 31st, and so that's just happened now. So I don't expect the RCMP to kind of have me that final invoice for that year, but we have been working with them, and I'm accruing for that, and that's where those numbers come.
They don't work within our budget. Here's the budget, and now they can just discretionarily go over it if they want to, like, isn't there any, do we have any control over that, I guess,
Well,
as a municipality?
Yeah, well, we certainly do. We work really well with our our sergeant's excellent.
Yes, I'm not disputing that.
Yes, he's excellent. And so I think sometimes it can be timing. Even when we look at the average of 10.26, I think that they had when he came to talk with us, they had lost like 3 officers all kind of in 1 week. I think a couple of ankles or whatever it was. And so all of a sudden you're down 3 people. You need to get people in, and members come and so I feel very comfortable that he does a very good job of trying to manage the budget. This just seems to be a real one-off year. And
I hope so.
Yeah, well, yes, and the expectation going forward is that we wouldn't have that, but these are conversations that are ongoing with myself and RCMP, and it is a big behemoth of an organization to deal with. And good, but I also don't get to peek inside of, if you have that much time and overtime, how much of it is related to the city of Trail? How much of it relates to, there's been some pretty horrific incidences outside of the city of Trail. But I don't have the ability to get in and get sometimes the detail that I would like to see. And well, if you had something very unique situation that we've had with some crimes here, and if should those people be allocated, to the government funded side of the formula. So sometimes, and there's a trust factor that I have with this.
Well, I was just gonna say, building the trust factor, because, $175,000 over budget without any consultation with us. I don't know what else you can call it, and then we just trust that it's a necessary expense, but it's, like I agree, it's shocking, and I think our constituents and our taxpayers are gonna be scratching their heads on it, myself.
Yeah.
And it's just not really acceptable, we need to keep it in check.
Yeah.
And
to be clear, this is proposed, so I'm getting this from the invoice that we would get for the end of December, then they go through the next 3 months, so that projection may be off, it may be less than that too.
or maybe higher.
There is that possibility, yes, there is that possibility. I would say not, because I know that the sergeant was noting that having some of the members back has allowed them to do some of the work that we've seen in the news recently in our community, and that's because they've been back up to a fuller complement of staff.
Well, Colin, I said a question. Do the other municipalities contribute to the RCMP
When you
funding as well?
when you say that, are you talking about like a Montrose or?
Yeah, just the other areas that they provide service for.
Yeah, so great question. So our detachment is about 22 members if it's fully staffed.
Yeah.
City has 12, but they had also invested in and asked for some additional members because they wanted to have a crime reduction unit on site, and we're finally getting back to that. So I know that the sergeant's very pleased. Now the other areas, once you hit 5,000 population, that's when you have to start paying. They pay on a property tax kind of level that's more provincial wide, so they pay the provincial portion, so
I see,
almost,
okay.
yeah,
So
so.
we do a direct part of our.
Right, our portion, here's our members, here's the costs, here's what you pay,
Yeah.
and then there's that 70, 100%, 70 share that we get, so we pay 70%. But inside that, they're paying for, if they're fully complemented, they would be paying for those other 8 members. So that would be a normal year for them. Yeah, and I don't get to see kind of that split as to what the invoice went off to or how it was worked on the provincial level. So I get to kind of see the one that's just for the city of Trent.
Well, they're a federal entity, they run their own show, and we've got them on contract. It's not like we have a municipal police force, which may allow us more access to some of these numbers that you're alluding to.
That's true, although I would say in my experience in Nelson and what they're dealing with right now, yeah, not necessarily a bad thing that we have RCMP here.
Oh, that'll be another discussion another day.
Fair enough, fair enough.
So, a quick question,
Sure.
Mr. McClure, do you think that, their new contract would have anything to do with the increase of their, costing of their staff and,
Definitely.
Yeah.
And the contract is up. I think it just ended
Mhm,
here in March
okay.
31st, but remembering that means that whatever we're dealing with, we're not also dealing with what we have seen in the past. It's sort of the retroactive, which will start in play now, and depending on when they get their contract, we may have okay, we're paying with this rate,
Yeah.
but here's what your new contract is. So that's part of the challenge. I tried also, we'll get there, but noting how many municipalities' tax increases were really high. And the main reason was trying to deal with policing.
Mhm.
So it's not just a challenge for us. They tend to be the go-to group when, you've got a situation. So in many of our communities at downtown, we've had the vulnerable population. Who is to handle those people and who's available 24/7? That's your RCMP. And so that's who gets the call many times. And so sort of a trickle down effect, I think, on their workload and what's happening. But again, a great deal of trust and working with our sergeant here locally. We talked a bit about just their, improved cash management process and the interest rate being higher is, that's always a positive when we can earn more money on the money we have on deposit. So when we look at 2025, from staff's perspective, 4% average overall property tax increase between all of the classes is what we're being recommended. Again, we're expecting the RCMP to be close to fully staffed, which has resulted in us increasing our budget if they're going to have those members at the cost per member. Even right now, when they were saying it's $245, I think I said per member, they're budgeting for 2025 is at $248. So again, that's additional 3,000. Part of that's going to be paid. Part of it, as I said before, whether or not it's gas costs, which maybe have come down, but right now, equipment that they have, vehicles, all those sorts of additional pieces that are wrapped inside that cost per member. It's not like the member is making that money. That's what the cost is to you. The city of Rossland and city of Trail extended the TRP agreement for 2 more years, and that increased that funding by $30,000. So that was great news. Again, as we alluded before, have been conservative, but I think appropriate in the amount of revenue improvements at the TMC and the Trail Leisure Aquatic Center. And that's again something that's really helping us with keeping the tax requisition lower. We already are seeing significant drop over the previous year on the interest income that we are earning. Not a surprise there. We did talk about before here that this budget numbers includes the half year of our manager of climate planning and climate action. And this position would move to a full-time in 2026 and onward, and will be significantly supported by the local government climate action funding. So it's again some pressure off of our residents for finding a new position. We are looking at using the $200,000 of our provincial COVID funding that we still have. Many municipalities have already used theirs up. Ours has not been there, but it's available, and we're going to use that to assist with some IT work that we need to do and some succession planning. This also includes the ongoing $100,000 increase towards the operating capital budget in 2025, and that's something that we're doing each year. We know that the cost of capital is not going down, and but that is included in there currently. Because there was, I think, some questions about some of the transfers we do, and I think that they're great questions, and it's something that we can review as we go forward. So my next slide here, and I'll put this on with sort of that caveat with it is that when you talk about a proposed tax increase, sometimes it won't be fair. If you've got the city of Abbotsford, what their 1% tax increase will be significantly more than what a city of Trail would be. In the same way, some of these smaller communities like Nosoyus or Kimberley will be a lot less than what there. But it is one of the ones that gives you sort of that snapshot of what's happening and being in this role for as long as I have, and when I look at what's happened since 2023, it is really quite staggering to see the increases, and of course they compound on each other, but it does tell you the pressure that municipal governments are under, not only with the effective inflation, especially over in 2023, and that rolling forward, expectations of our staffing of being compensated because they are having to deal with inflation. What we see is the downloading a lot of times from the provincial government on certain costs as well. And the stat that I saw that was recently is that since 2020, the cost of construction has gone up 70%. So that's, even when we talk about inflation, we were pretty low negative in 2020 during COVID. Yes, it started to go up, but even at its max, it was at 6 or 7%. And even if you compile that over the last 5 years, even that inflation on regular goods doesn't get even close to what the construction cost component has gone up. And we tend to be a lot of capital focused, and there has been a lot of a drive from the province, whether or not it's saying you need to have an asset management plan. If you're going to get a grant, we want to be able to see what you're doing with your asset management plan. We want you to report out on your progress and what you're doing with your asset management plan. Because in many communities, and you see that as you go out where it gets ignored, it's in the ground. We don't pull up the pipes. We don't deal with the transmission lines of water and sewer. And that's certainly not something that is coming into focus now, that is something that cannot be ignored. When we go to repair it, it's expensive. And on top of it, I believe with the provincial mandate change on zoning, that all of our communities are going to start to see the pressure that comes. And I'm not saying it's happening next year, but as we go through time, if you can have a home that before had one house on it, and you can now have 3 dwelling units on it, and that starts to change on a block, you know that infrastructure that's in the ground that was put in the 1950s for, let's say, 8 homes on a block wasn't meant to service 24 dwelling units. So these are things that are coming, but we also know that we want to make sure that our municipality is open for business. We want to have housing. We know that it's critical. We went through the housing needs report just a couple of meetings ago, and the drive towards making sure that we've got proper accommodation for residents and for renters and for visitors. One thing that I thought was really quite interesting was West Vancouver, kind of almost of all places, where they pulled from a bunch of different reserves to make their increase less. And again, it's a pretty affluent community in a sense, but I think that that's probably the value of the homes and that sort of thing does drive, on the assessed value. Again, what the rate is not necessarily reflective of the value of the homes. So, but taking that into consideration, just thought it can be one of those things that, certainly on the finance side, when that council comes in and says, we're not increasing taxes or we're going 0, it just means that you're just pushing it down the road for someone else to have to come in and increase the rates. And certainly at the city of Trail, we've seen that kind of wear on our water system. I mean, when council's been bold on trying to get us to a place where we're going to be able to fund ongoing infrastructure renewal. And so those are moves that haven't been taken care of in the past. Okay.
So just
yes.
if you could,
Yeah.
so now that Roslyn knows that their taxes are going to be 10% for the next 5 years, they still have to go through the budget process,
Absolutely,
just like
yeah.
okay,
So, and again, so their report out would be, this is what we need to do.
okay,
You have a council that has said, okay, we see that it's a 5% for irregular inflation for operations, but that's a great example.
Mhm.
Hadn't been putting enough money aside or putting money into the infrastructural renewal up there. Been pretty common in the last year of, hey, streets closed, we've got a blowout. Not that we haven't had that either, but I've just been noticing that Roslyn's had some tough challenges this year. In the past probably 6 or 7 months on water main breaks and that sort of thing, and having to deal with that. But to be clear, yes, it will come up again next year. And the year after, you just can't, you could have that in your plan bylaw, but I would also say to you that you get a new council come in there, they may come in and say, hey, you know, we need to pull back on this or make
Okay,
changes.
yeah, that was my
The-
next
Yeah, the
question.
council,
Okay.
you know, because the bylaw comes, the tax rate bylaw comes every year, and so does the financial plan. So
Mhm.
that's an opportunity for council to do that, whether they do or not, that's a different conversation, but.
Councillor
Thank you,
Thompson.
through the chair. It's one slide back, but I was wondering if you could speak more on the manager of planning and climate change. I had some feedback from some constituents over the weekend.
Yeah.
Concern more of the climate part, and I get the planning part and the desperate need for it in the city, and just wondering why the two, just to communicate that
Yeah, no, it's a
More
great question.
eloquently than I feel.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Part of it is, we do have a bump right now in planning. And that is kind of coming off of a couple of people's desks, and we're doing the best we can.
Mhm.
We're also, employing through a contract with a vendor. And again, they charge out at a pretty high rate for the work that they do. And so I think that was the driver. But the other part that the city kind of, I think, needs to look towards, and especially with the current government and the government's been in place, is what are you doing on climate action? And just even to have a plan, and the fact that they provide us funding to be able to do that kind of work. So what I would say is that I think that if a proper manager of planning comes in here, they may take some time to get up to speed, but we're a pretty small organization, and I would hate to see that, you know, there's not enough for them to do. And when I say that, but this is a nice bridge together, and it also, I think, takes pressure off of the taxpayer from funding that we've already received from the government towards improving what we do in our climate action. I think being able to report out. I also think that a lot of times there's a lot of benefits that come with, hey, we can change out, you know, these LED lights. I'm being facetious, but or not facetious, but I'm just saying those might be small. But those are the sorts of programming things that we do. Our staff and do look at that. But if you had a plan, if you have someone that says, here's a plan, we want to be able to move our vehicles to this, or we want to be able to improve our lighting, or we want to improve the building envelopes that we have because we see that we're leaking a lot of energy that way. That would be my the hope for that. So in some senses, we got the money, takes the pressure off of the taxpayer to have someone in this position. My hope is that they, like I talked to many staff, we want to work in a place where we actually pay for ourselves by providing savings or finding for opportunities for efficiencies. And that would be the drive, I believe, for this position.
Great question to the chair. Just, do other municipalities have that kind of joint job description for the planner, or is that something that's going to be unique to Trail?
There are some that have it because
You're
it tends
seeing
to
it,
be
the
a type.
two go hand in hand, there's a synergy there that can work together.
I believe that there is, yes. And, you know, you get a place like Nelson, they have a whole department of climate action people. And many of them are built on grants only. And so that's one of the pieces that makes it a bit risky. So you can have this, but as long as the grant's kind of coming, this way here, we've got a position, in our fold. Gives us, I think, some planning documents, because there certainly has been conversations. The city signed on to being, you know, carbon neutral. I have to tell you that that's an area as I've been running around trying to deal with some of the other areas of finance that someone came to me and said, well, how are you doing towards that? I would say, yeah, I can tell you, hey, we bought some electric vehicles. Hey, we know that we're gonna be using the heat from the ammonia plant to start assisting with, you know, the heat costs at the Memorial Center. But I know that there's more, and so and it's.
It's not gonna scare applicants off, like, look, I think, I know planning, I know city planning very well, this other aspect of it is all foreign to me.
Yeah. The GM Butler just noted that Castlegar does combine the role.
Okay, thank you.
So having a manager that is planning and climate action, does that give us a greater ability when we're planning for or applying for fund or grants? because we have
Well, I would say to you that there's a number of things that are coming out now, and we discussed this a little bit before, which is some of the Indigenous training. And your staff and your council have Indigenous training, climate action. They're not funding, hey, and in the past they would, hey, we wanna upsize the pipeline on Second Street, and here's a grant for this. They're not paying for that, but if you're finding something that saves energy, that's where the grant funding is coming from, and not only provincially, but federally as well. So that's where you see those buy-ins, and so I think having someone that's helping us either know where to look, know that there's a grant, helps us with our plan, where are we leaking the most? Where are we compared to other buildings of similar age group or similar size, or as our energy, is our energy use appropriate?
okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we had seen this slide before. I just think it's really a key slide for council, because there is this fallacy that, oh my goodness, assessed value went up $50,000, I'm gonna get killed for taxes. And that's just not what we do. So the number one thing that happens is that if you've got the average change of home, we'll get sort of basically what, it's not gonna be perfect, because no home's gonna be in that perfect there, but if you had a 5% increase in the value of your home, and the average was 5%, and the increase was 4% of taxes, you should see a linear kind of math on it. Now, if your property only ended up being 1%, then you would in fact expect, and should expect, that your taxes will go down. Even though there's been a 4% increase on taxes, your portion of the taxes of the tax pie will go lower, because your property assessed value is lower than the average. Now, on Sabo, if you had a 10% increase in the average, in the increase of your home, that shifting is what's going to happen, and that's just the same pie of taxation. You're getting more of the allocation, because your house is increased in value over and above. Now, this does not include the fact that if someone buys a piece of land and builds a home on it, that is new construction, so you're kind of, this tax assessment on averages is can kind of play with that a bit, but if you're in that area, that's based on the taking into account the market change, the non-market change, like I said, where someone builds big renovation, or they buy a house, or buy a lot and build a home on it, that's new money coming into the city. There hasn't been a significant amount of new money over the last several years. Yeah, it's trickled in a bit. Again, some of those things that I think having the manager of planning, making sure we're open for business. We know that we've got people asking questions. We had a development variance permit come just not too long ago, I think, for 4 units that are gonna be built. So those are the sorts of drivers of, there's a lot there, nothing there. Now you're gonna have 4 condo units. They're gonna be assessed at a certain value. That's gonna be ongoing revenue, or new revenue, and ongoing for the city going forward. But that'll just, again, remembering that if the increase, because we've had certain years where we've had like 16, 18, 20% increase in assessed values, it doesn't create a cash cow for the city, because we would be broke if we did those sorts of things. You might think if you did it, but then what happens when you get a negative year, right? To get the money back.
Co-chair, how would, assuming that, trail operations challenges their assessment again, how do you take that into account when you're calculating the tax rate for us? Because I'm guessing you're basing it off of what their assessed was on their
Correct.
notification,
Correct.
but.
So a couple things, the BC assessment provides a completed roll, so that is basically all the properties, right around December-ish. And that's when the letters go out to all of the entities that have properties, and you get yours and you say, hey, my house isn't worth that much, and then you go in and put an appeal in, and that's sort of where tech kind of has their opportunity to do that. Certainly, I saw in the first iteration, so in most cases, you would expect, tech has been different, that gets resolved within the year, or even with the time period of almost like a residential, where when we get the completed roll in late December, then at the end of March, we get the revised roll, and that has to do with whatever business, whatever home that is successful in saying, my property is this, or my property should be in a different class, or this increase is unvalidated, they go through that processes, and that's where we get the new number, and that's where we get the revised number.
Okay.
And the revised numbers actually was a little bit lower. I don't know if council would have remembered the previous slide, but we were down a bit from the completed rule to the revised rule, mostly on residential. There was no change at all for utilities, light construction, or major industry or light industry. But that is something that theirs is a bit more complicated, and as we've seen before, when they had a 4-year change, so you can get caught up with that. Certainly, again, working with the management of tech, they understand that they're a major tax holder. They do have the right, as any entity does that believes that their assessment's not correct, to appeal it. That is just their given right. But they are also cognizant of, hey, that's a big change to the city of Trail. We want to work with you. So that's one thing that's given me confidence that if there was a surprise or something changed, I also have to trust in BC Assessment that their management of the numbers that they come and work on, will be providing a correct number. Yeah, and that's where, again, when I see the results of the change that they did get, that was over 4 years, so it wasn't like it was, a huge thing for us to carry. Not that it wasn't a lot, but I'm just saying it wasn't like a huge number.
Okay.
Okay, and then I was just here, council remembered or maybe they don't, but the previous time that we had talked, the increase over residential was 6.6. You can see so that we did have a bit of a drop, so it's now the change is 6.16. Residential does make up almost 74% of the assessed values. Utility, slight change. Major industry, again, even though they may have some questions, may have appealed, you can see that BC Assessment value for that site went up almost 8%, 1 year over another. Light industry not changed. Business, again, a lot of that can be businesses is not like a home where it's like, hey, this person's house is similar to yours and it sold 2 blocks over and there's some similarities, and that's where they sort of do that housing based on sales. Businesses have to do with like, how much rent are you charging for your building, or what kind of business are you in, and they look at the financials piece. So that's one reason, and that can be a good thing to say like, hey, this value of this business is higher because the property of the work that's being performed there. And or the rents are going up, which doesn't surprise a lot of times if you've got a business, even demand. If you see rental property for homes going up, then you can expect that the cost of having a business and being able to rent a space is going to go up as well. To be clear on this though, even on that assessed value, we do kind of have that same pie share, so we don't make the changes, don't automatically equate to this inside the city of Trail. We balance that out to our formula in places like the RDKV. When you have an increase, like for residential over light industry over business, that does shift because the multiplier doesn't change from the province. So that can be, and we have seen that, and I've showed some different slides in the past where tech was up a bit and then dropped a bit as the residential properties have increased in value.
I think it's interesting that they assess our forest.
Yeah, one forest property, yeah. What's the?
I mean, nothing really changes there.
No, and again, it dropped quite a bit, and a lot of
Yeah.
that has to do with if they've taken some lumber off it, I believe. Kind of see from this chart here, which I think is quite visually quite incredible actually when I think about it. So class 2 just in there, so we talk about class 1 being residential, class 2 being utilities, class 4 being heavy industry, class 5 being light. 6 tends to be business, managed floor 7, and class 8 is not-for-profit. And again, pretty small, but you can see what's happened with the residential property on that. And you can really see how it kind of flatlined and dropped a bit in 2024. And then again, we're up and down another 6.16%. But you look at that number from basically 2020, right, to yeah, it's significant. Which again could be challenging because you can be sort of house house rich, if you could say, and cash poor. I mean, if you're like, yeah, my house has gone up from, was the average of 200, now it's $400,000 in X amount of years, but I'm still trying to pay the groceries and makes it difficult. The average family dwelling in 2025 is $406,000. And last year was 382, so that's that kind of that 6.16% increase. And looking at proposing on that 4% increase on at that average home, based on the rates, would be a $41 increase for the municipal portion. I don't yet, I'm still waiting on school tax, BC assessment, hospital taxes, so that's why we try to give a snapshot here of what we know is due. I also want to just make a comment, because some of the things you don't necessarily remember, but it's like, we had some additional funds last year and we said, you know what, let's pay off that Vector truck, the interest rate was higher. So that in itself means that our tax, because we have kind of a tax debt, that dropped as well. So when you look at a municipality at a 4% increase and just sort of dealing with the fact that last year we used funds to be able to pay down some debt, we're at about $36 increase for the average home in Trail. Now, the big one, and this has been in conversation for a number of months now, it's not easy, and I tried to break down on a sheet at one of the last pages of sort of what makes up the RDKB services that we're in. Reality wise, as much as this is difficult on the 2025 number, the majority of that increase relates to the sewage treatment plant upgrade. And the fact that the RDKB was successful in getting a significant grant. As we talked before, you get a 70% increase in construction costs, how they're managing that. It's that gap between where the grant was and what they were expecting to do, is that money that they're having to borrow, and it's a lot, is what really has driven up that rate in 2025. The other part that I would say is that they have kind of got that in place, so they're making that increase now to be able to fund the debt. But there isn't an expectation like, oh, now we're in year 2 of construction or year 3 of construction, that number is going to continue climbing like that. It should be flatlining. Now, in the same boat as we look down below, there have been some other pressures. General government is one, and that's one that is a bit harder for a municipality like ours to deal with, because we pay about 20 some odd % of what that is. But you pay for Jim Butler, you pay for myself, you pay for staff here to do the operations, and now you're paying an additional 20% towards the regional district to take care of their books, and to be able to do their planning and to do their corporate officer stuff. So sometimes that can be one of the things, but it has in the past mostly just been something that isn't understood, that if you're part of the regional district, that's how it's funded. So it's not really a lot you can do about that. I do know that all of the directors really were concerned and asking questions and pushing on the increases that were coming forward. And in the same way that we discussed earlier about West Van using some surpluses, one of the things that's coming to fruition now is that surpluses were used in the past and kind of kept rates, I would say, artificially low. So like, maybe if you had kind of gone up a little bit each year, rather than sort of keeping it kind of flat or whatever, that all of a sudden now you're in a place where it's like, we don't have anything in the reserve to cover the cost in some of these regional district services. But you can see that increase in 2025 is 33%. And so again, as your home is valued more, that increase is going to be higher. And if it's lower, then obviously you still be 33% over compared to what 2024, 25 at. Okay, and then we have my mistake in 2023. So it's kind of a tax holiday. And so that's been 2 years of the tax holiday. And we're putting that in there that needs to be recovered here in 2025. Not a great year to be recovering the tax, and it's not lost on me. But that is the reality, is that this is funds that the city itself is covering, that we paid the regional district, and it was something that much as I'm quite sure that no one that pays taxes, feels that there was a benefit to them of not paying the tax at the time. But there will be, or there has been, and remembering that we're talking here about that amount is the residential portion, which again, is in that pie of the regional district will be sort of in that 35 residential, 30, major industry and broken out that way as well. So you're just focusing here, this is kind of where it hits that average home. And it has gone down a bit just with some of the allocations, not a lot, but.
$2.
Yeah,
91.
there you go, yes, yeah.
So and then, Jerry. Once that's done, that will fall off, it's a one
It
time.
is a one-time, yeah, like I said, the timing is not great and I'm fully aware of that. And I fully aware it was an error that I made, and so.
Counselor Benson.
Through the chair, 2 questions. One might be ridiculous, I don't know, but so say someone moved to Trail after the 2023 mistake. Do they need to pay the $89 even though they weren't here? Okay,
That is correct, Counselor Benson, and that's where I had gone with working with the ministry on trying to make sure that the value and the property values of the home and that sort of thing, would be equitable, and that's why it's out here an extra year, is because they said you can't just.
oh, that's
Like,
when you,
that's-
okay,
I was
when you
trying
said
to-
last year that they didn't accept.
Yes, that was part of what I was trying to do. They're just like, yeah, whatever your assessed value, so if your assessed value has gone up, maybe your assessed value has gone down, you're just gonna pay at whatever that your assessed value rate is. Right, so that's where, and yes, you're right, if someone had come in and bought the house in 2024. Yeah,
Okay.
they're covering the tax holiday that homeowner got in 2023. We could ask the realtors if they, wanna reach out to
And the
those that sold the
lawyers to
property
adjust.
to see if they wanna, like, I, not being facetious, but I know it's not a good time for these sorts of things, but that's one of the effects.
And then my second question, would we, I like the slide where you show the comparisons, but this is my main focus is this large increase on the
Yeah.
RDKB tax, especially for those on a fixed income. And if we could also have with the table, the ones that do also pay into the regional district, could we get what their increase, like understanding that the city of Trail is 33%? Could we know what like Warfield Rosslyn is so we can kind of have comparing apples to,
You can, except this is one of the challenges on trying to compare apples to apples.
I know that they're not all part of the sewage
Well,
treatment.
well, certainly, Roslyn and Warfield. are.
Yes,
So Warfield does theirs a bit differently. They do a parcel tax for the sewage treatment plant.
okay,
So, again, because this is one of the questions I got from a person that owns property in Warfield and a property here was like, hey, why is this more? And it was like, oh, hey, the taxes are different. I said, well, actually, your rate here is your actual utility rate for the city of Trail is for both water and sewer. When you got your bill from Warfield, it was for water. You pay yours through things, and that, my understanding is that there's some sort of equity there in that it's not spread out on assessed value. Now, they're mostly residential anyway, but each property, I'm understanding, went up $300 to pay just for their sewer component. So here you might say, you're at an average home, you're at 254, and then that includes some other things,
Yeah.
right? But if I have properties a bit less, I would pay a bit less, and if you're, properties more, you're gonna pay a bit more.
Yeah.
But in Warfield, one of the things I'm doing, that kind of parcel tax piece is say each property shall pay
okay,
their amount regardless of what the assessed value
Right.
property is. So I could
Interesting.
certainly try to work on doing some of that information and even as I think the numbers are coming out for all of the groups, that's sometimes the hard part is not fast yet, but it's sort of seeing what was the effect on some of the other properties that were also involved with the sewer treatment plant.
Yeah.
I know that Roslyn, they had sort of reserve going from some expectations of higher rates, and they kind of kept them higher at that time. And kind of knew that they were creating a reserve, which then allows them to sort of soften that blow a bit over the next couple of years. In the same boat, they are also increasing their
yeah,
residential taxes or their property taxes are going up by 10%, 5% for inflationary and 5% for infrastructure.
Counselor Henson.
And I guess, going back, to the RCMP part with Roslyn, would that also encompass whatever their portion of, the RCMP as they're not quite 5,000?
Right.
And would that take any pressure off of us, or it's directly just taking over that portion of the provinces?
Yeah, so they're not at 5,000, so what happens for all properties that are all communities and under 5,000, the province sets out a rate on the assessed value.
Right.
And so they sort of pay that directly, it comes almost in the same way that school tax comes and then gets submitted to the province.
Right.
So,
That won't change for us.
Wouldn't change for us.
Okay.
And then I just wanted to sort of look, because I think that, yes, pretty serious mistake by me, but when I look overall on the next slide here. I think the council should be very pleased with the overall effect on how we're managing what's happening in the city for a community like for your. This is us increasing our municipal taxes. We're able to pay down some debt, so that gave us a break. The water rates, we knew that they're having to come up and council's moving on that. Sewer rates in a good spot, and then the resource recovery, because that is one of the other things that is affecting our taxes as well as the fact that we used to collect $25 extra out of the utility piece, and so now you're not paying that, and you are paying in your taxation. And so you can see on that average home, that $25 compared to the property taxes going up by 41. You're and overall, this is just, again, remembering, this is just sort of the services that we collect for on behalf of the municipality. So. And, Starbucks's prices have gone up, so the $5.26 per month is it's not ridiculous, but this is just, again, the municipal portion, not lost on me that more obviously coming out of the regional district.
So, Mr. McClure,
Yes.
is that resource recovery there all the time as well? Is that going to keep being funded back to the?
So right now, council made the decision back in late November and into December to remove that $25 fee. So that's now gone. That lowered obviously what the utility bill was, but the commitment was that we would still continue to do the fall and spring
Okay.
yard cleanup. That is in the budget. That is
Okay.
being funded, and in sort of inside that increase of our taxes currently, what we're requesting, results in that not showing up again on the utility bill and sort of blending in the taxation. But it is another place where we would have had a cost pressure, but with some of the improvements that we've had with whether or not it's airport expectation for revenue, TMC rentals, talc emissions and those sorts of things, those are really helping us. And it's the same thing that hurt you when COVID came. That's why the city was, hurt more than other entities, because we have so much entrepreneurial type money. If you don't have planes flying and you don't have people being able to use your pool and your rink and rent things, and most of the costs are still quite similar. So that's one of the things that's same way, it's a double-edged sword. You get tough times or a COVID sort of situation, hurts you harder. As we move forward, you get back into people using the facilities more, it improves our revenues. Just again, because I think it's always kind of interesting, and so we've kind of followed through on that average single family dwelling. If someone said, well, what if we decreased it to, instead of 4%, you'd be 3.75. You can see that so my mouth is not working correctly, so that's one of those slides. So that should not be 39, that should be probably 172 is what it's supposed to be. So I've say that should be $1,072, not $1,082. It shouldn't go up if the tax increase went down. So, but you can see that the amount between kind of quarter increases in taxes on an average home is it's not a lot. It's a few dollars, $3 up, $2 down. Part of looking at right now, if we go in at 4% or slightly under that, we have kind of a surplus of 12,000. And if you go at a 3.75, you can see the gap there on that 25 on a whole for all of the collections of taxes that you move from a $12,000 surplus to a $28,000 deficit, and that's like 4% versus 3.75. And just kind of again showing you the overall, not just the home, but this would be all taxpayers. So again, class 1 to 8, as we discussed earlier. So that change is about $40,000. Yeah. So and here was sort of the, who are we collecting taxes from? So you can see on the residential at 73% of the assessed value that you're picking up, $4.3 million. Utility, major industry is obviously a significant contributor, business as well. Not getting a lot from the forest. So, because we don't have all the numbers in, I kind of carried this slide forward, which is showing 2024's tax distribution on a average family dwelling at that time of 382,000. And we can see where the city of Trail sits on that. We're about 41% of the overall pie. And with the breakdown of school and RDKB at that time, certainly going to see RDKB moving to 50% when we look at what's 2025 results.
So, sorry, the regional district Kootenai boundary, we're going up $780 per single family dwelling.
So, what I was saying is that if we look at the previous slides, when you look at the number for RDKB, it's at 780, it's going to 1,030, I think is what we looked at before. So it's going up to that $254 is what we're projecting. At the same time, when we do that, it's gonna be pretty close to being 50% or in that range, I think. Of taxes. Maybe not that high, actually.
Sorry,
Through the chair, is there any reason to believe that the school and hospital? Is there any hints that it would be a big increase from
You know,
last year, or is it usually pretty steady?
it has been pretty steady. School taxes are. And there may be some pressure on the trail taxpayer this year, and the reason why, because you also saw that in the regional district. Allocation of the sewage treatment plant upgrade is that those properties, like how they divvy it up is based on assessed value, and the sharing of on the regional district, it's based on assessed values. And Roslyn stayed pretty flat this year, and City of Trail went up, on average, overall, even on residential, 6.16%. So in the same way that we talk about how the tax shifting goes inside a property on your assessed value change, same thing happens at the RDKB. If we're increasing in taxes, then we tend to be a place where we're going to pick up some of the other costs on some of the things like hospital and school. Now, when you deal with a hospital, you're also dealing with the entire region, and I know that Nelson has gone up quite a, went up as well, and so. And their numbers are higher than ours on assessed value, so sometimes that's the one that you can see that you may get a break. Because some of the assessed values of all those that are participating in the hospital are higher than ours. So that can be sometimes a break. School tax is a bit different. Two things. One is that on the commercial side, the province collects all of the kind of commercial and then divvies that out based on kind of like, here's how much we need to collect from the other classes. And then they, so if you've got things booming in, say, Chilliwack, they're gonna pick up more, so you may even have the allocation being for commercial may go up, but it actually is being paid more by, say, some of the lower mainland properties than there are in the city of Trail. In the same way, on the residential side, they take into account all of the properties that are inside the catchment area of School District 20. So we would have to do sort of a test on, hey, if Montrose was lower and Roslyn's lower and Trail's higher, then you can expect a bit of an allocation of some of those school taxes. And we don't know where, what that rate's going to be. I'm going to be very curious because, they canceled the carbon tax. And, so, they've also been hit pretty hard by the rating agencies in the province of BC. And so I'll be curious to see, what the plan is. We don't have the number yet. It doesn't come for usually later, even by the time we made our decision.
Okay.
But there is some risk there, I would say, on the school tax, that it could be higher just, and sometimes it says school tax, but to be clear, they collect taxes for all kinds of things. It just kind of goes on the school tax title. It doesn't go to just fund schools. If you look at what they spend that money on, it's way more than schools.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Councilman,
The new school, Glen Mary School, will that be showing an impact as well?
And it shouldn't, right? And this is where it sometimes gets lost, and I will go back and look at all of the funding that they kind of. Yeah. Okay. It's kind of a misnomer sometimes when you say, here's what we're collecting this tax, but it doesn't, you say, well, hey, you're collecting this much tax. Cover school tax, but the school system doesn't cost that much, right? So then that you're using it for other parts of the provincial's, fundings, right? So that's what it is, but I will take a look, put a note to myself on,
And they are exempt from property taxes, correct? Yeah.
yes, what's that? No, I was trying to, if I email myself, I'm better at keeping that, reminding myself to.
Sorry, Councillor Hanson, what did you just say?
I just said they're exempt though from any property tax increases for the new construction and new building for us.
Yeah, they do play, a grant in lieu, so again, so that's something that you can just don't get we can't just charge them taxes. But they assess their properties and then they send money for, like say it's a clean house or different things like that.
Okay.
The public bodies, buildings that they have, they do provide a grant.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and because we don't have any numbers yet, that's one of the questions. That will be, I'll be very curious to find out what's happening on the provincial side of things. Okay, and so on this slide here, was trying to, very clearly, you can see that, when you're looking at this particular slide, that, the increase in the, East End Regional Sewer is really what's driving that, so. Percentage even increases is very significant. We'll see the numbers, if you were in line, obviously we wouldn't be hit that hard. We'll note, like I was saying before, where you've got, general admin, we're up 37% over the previous year. We pick up 20% of that general admin number that goes into fund similar roles that the city has. Now, again, I do appreciate that they take care of the East End Regional Service as far as, doing the work there or managing, whatever on the accounting side for getting the loans and those sorts of things. So it's not like it's just lost that way. So fire protection, again, some increasing there. It's again, it's a 7%, but it's city picks up a significant amount, and anytime when you've got that East End 7, you can see that when we talk a lot of times when people come and ask us for funding and if you're gonna ask us the group, you're doing it for the whole group, you can see that based on this formula, if we're sharing this the way that it normally gets shared, we're in it for 39%, and that's yeah, and in fact, sorry, 39.24. So if you go in that, this is where I was talking about that allocation component. So because our assessed values were up higher than the other municipalities, that's why you're seeing in 2024, 20.27 for the service by trail, 20.6 by trail in 2025, because our assessed values went up. And trail of Roslyn, and obviously some of the other area, the big white there, can be some of the ones that really can move around depending on what the values increase. But yeah, it does show you that kind of hit from being a popular place, and people wanting to buy homes and be here and raise a family and find it's a great place to live. Gets popular and that drives up housing prices. So those are my general fund.
Just as you finish.
Yes, well, hey. I'm happy to take any questions. I feel really comfortable and confident in what the city of Trail is doing. It can be very difficult. On the regional district side, we it is an entity that we are a part of. Genuinely not putting, sewage, raw stuff back into the Columbia makes a lot of sense for us. So there's a big hit this year. We knew it was coming, and I know that our director works hard with the others on the board to try to do their best to contain cost pressures. But one of the differences could be is they don't have some of the sales. They don't have a rink you can rent or a pool you can go to, so they don't have some of those drivers on the revenue side that the city of Trail has and is benefiting from this year in particular. The tax increase that would have likely been asked for to maintain the normal regular services that we have. If we didn't have such success in some of our recreation facilities.
Any questions or any more comments for Mr. McClure? So that's something.
The year that there was no increase in taxes for the city of Trail, was there an increase? It was sometime during COVID, I believe, right?
Mhm.
Was there an increase in regional district?
Hmm.
And I guess what was the driver in the 0% raise? Was there another big cost or was it just like because of?
Well, I think most places when COVID hit really. Did that, I mean, I know that a number of, I'm not sure exactly what happened in regional district, but that certainly meant, there was also some loss of employment.
Yeah.
And again, too, they kind of went off, but then they could get some CERB. and,
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
CERB was a factor. So anyway, I just want to, as we discussed this too, because I thought there was, some comments that I think that need to be taken into consideration, and I'm gonna move up here to our single page here on the piece, but we have been putting money towards, and I would, as a staff member say, I wouldn't be touching, kind of what we're putting into the capital reserve each year, but there was a question about the old bridge. Like what if you didn't, increase that this year, right? So you can see that would probably lower what your tax increase would be, but it is, and as we've talked before, I think in the water fund, it is quite fascinating what does happen. And this would be, again, when we talk about trying to do that for our community, that could make sense. Especially when it's just sort of a transfer that is, we're just trying to build up the reserve. And so there was a question like, hey, what if we took the old bridge reserve out for a year, right? And you can see that would get you not quite, just a little bit over 0.5% savings for the current year, and then if you put it back on, but there is also sort of that compounding effect, right? If you kind of have that lower year, then it does affect later on, but that's not something I don't think that should be off the table. But it is one of those ones that some of the other ones are a little bit more difficult. It's the capital, the corporate reserve, and those sorts of things. Do note as well that we are looking at a pretty significant surplus in the current year. Again, the audit is underway. They have been here. They've been working on they were here for their field work all last week, and they're now back and sort of finishing off. The hope is that we will actually have the statements for the 28th of April for council to approve in Cameron. But just letting you know that this is where we're sitting currently, and that was from some of the things we talked about, just the additional revenues over budget. Yes, we had the cost pressure from the RCMP, but the more than budgeted money for interest income, so that's where we're sitting. Part of that, we had looked at pushing over into the water fund or to help out on increases for that fund, so that's one, but even on that amount, it's still, there's some money there that could be, considered. My thought process, especially as we're dealing with some of the RFPs that are coming in, that some of the additional surplus could be looked at for getting into the capital reserve to help fund secret capital.
Counselor Hanson.
In regards to our asset management,
Mm.
some of a lot of these recent capital projects, other than, significance of Daniel Street, the TMC, we've spent a lot of money recently on the Memorial Center.
Yeah.
But doing climate action, making sure that we can use the kids back year round,
Yep.
so we have opportunities to create that revenue generation back. Making sure the boards are safer and, but after that, I mean, what would you foresee as our next major capital project? That, okay, if we're doing some sort of upgrade, we've had these significant upgrades. Can we cool our jets a little bit, for a year or two on some of the massive capital projects and just do the stuff that we need to do, like making sure that the roads are done well, the services that are provided, the day-to-day of, you know, infrastructure, as opposed to, you know, big capital projects, like, is there things that we could possibly defer? You know, I mean, I get it, it's still gonna have to be done and it could cost more money and whatnot, but where can we see a line of, let's push that off 6 months, let's push that off till, you know, 2026.
And certainly that was one of the things that we went through. And depending on where some of these RFPs come in, that may be some of the other conversations that we will have. And that was the other part I was gonna say, so we have to have a budget by, you know, to get for council. But it doesn't mean that you're set there. So if something comes along and you need to adjust, then that's where, you know, you guys need to have a budget to allow you to operate. But as far as the problem is concerned, but if you have a change here, you need to add here, or you want to deduct from somewhere else there, those are all conversations that we have during the year, and that's allowed. And as long as, you know, council approves or is aware of, you know, whatever changes we're making, whether or not they're up or down. You know, taking a project off to maybe, you know, push it out because you need to fund a current project this year that needs to get done. So those are some conversations that can happen. And that is just allowed. Now, the one challenge, and when we sat here in strategic priorities, one of the big things that we saw, like, for example, is that there's the one with the cantilevered sidewalk.
Letter Road.
Lever Road. So that's kind of one of the next real big ones sort of thing. And so don't get me wrong, it's there. Do you say you push it off a year? I don't know, but I'm just saying to you, those, when we looked at some of these ones, and this was sort of that, hey, we're mapping on asset management, we know that you know, it's not going down per se. But I've also seen a lot of success, you know, really hoping, you know, cutting up natural gas through these air top units at the TMC. That can be something that can help us, you know, that's funding us on operations, that takes some pressure off as well. So I don't see necessarily an answer for you, because someone else was saying, you know, we haven't, you know, look at what has been Gay Road look like, you know, and trying to work in that particular area. And so there was more on the strategic priority list as far as us right now trying to get through what we can do in the term. A couple things that come to mind though, if you say you were successful in putting 80 or 90 units above where 900 Spokane is. Yeah, that's gonna take some time to get there, but that is 80 or 90 units at a certain average price of a value that brings in tax revenue. So there is some of that drive of the effort that this council is doing to revitalize in the downtown. Will start to pay. Again, it's that, I don't want to say it's necessarily entrepreneurial, but it is about thinking about revitalization. Hey, we can go up a number of stories now, we can put nice housing in there, we can put all kinds of housing if we want to, and we've got a few different options in that area. So if you do that, what does that look like in 3 to 5 years? What kind of additional income is that bringing for us? Does that take pressure off just general operation? Does that allow us to put money towards, you know, some of these capital projects that we see coming down the road? And I also believe that kind of with this planning, being open for business, seeing some of these other locations, building and having some new construction, new money coming in that will help the taxpayer that's here. And help fund some of this increased costs in infrastructure. To be clear, and again, you see sort of what's happening with Roslyn. It is province-wide. This is not a case of, you know, trail, you know, we've been doing a good job, I think, of trying to maintain our assets. And the amount of, if you think about holding the HVAC system in that building, upgraded ammonia plant, which again, we always want to make sure that we're top quality there. 2 brand new ice sheets in the past, you know, basically to be 24 months or so. Those things haven't been touched in 50, 60 years, right? And so, and sometimes it's time to pay, and we, and I say we, you know, because it wasn't me, but previous council and staff were able to get a grant that covered a significant portion of that heat recovery plant, which is going to save the city money. And it took that money away from the taxpayer, and you're gonna have a facility that, again, another grant for the Victoria View Room, you're seeing revenue generations from that. Doesn't mean there's gonna be more work to be done, but these councils and what we're seeing here today is that we are investing in our community, and I would hope that you will see the fruits of that labor. I mean, it doesn't help right now when we're in the middle of a crazy tariff war that no one can really figure out what's up or down, and the threats that's out there. not lost on me that we're trying to deal with, tricky issues for people that are on fixed income, absolutely. But I would also say that most cases, their property value has doubled in the past 4 years.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that you said. I don't know if we ever take a break off of, upgrading our infrastructure. It's just, something that we are constantly doing. I think it's something we need to do. We've got so many sidewalks and, roadways that need upgrading. It's just something that we definitely have to keep, looking at when we're looking at our budgets and planning ahead for sure.
But to be clear, this year's capital budget's pretty significant, looking at getting the daycare going. You got 901 and 900 Spokane, you've got the Memorial Center, you got the rink and the boards being replaced in the Cominco Arena. It's a big year.
Okay, do we have any other questions or comments?
Through the chair, if I
Sure,
could. I
go
was
ahead.
just hoping for, some sort of break for the taxpayers with that extra money we owe the regional district. That's what I was looking for, so. I'm not sure if I'll be able to support it or not, just out of principle for the folks who are barely scraping by right now, so.
Respect that completely, and that's something that council can, would just need a sort of a. Whether you want to take a portion of it and say, write that off with, this year's sort of profits, you could, that is definitely something that is within council's purview. So it's something that can be considered for sure.
I do respect the work that you've done here too, so.
Understood. Timing's not great.
Councilor Benson.
Would you be able to, sorry, through the chair, would you be able to provide us with, say we did put the, some of the surplus towards this, you're saying we may have that at the end of the audit, however that flushes out.
Yeah.
And then, get a pun, flushes, and then, if we did have the old bridge just for 1 year to be put towards this, I'm kind of in the same boat, it's just, it's a very large increase for the 33% hike is, if we can alleviate that burden as any way we can, I'm all for that.
Well, if you guys want to talk amongst yourselves, and I'll see if I can pull up here.
There's no pressure.
We'll just stare at you.
Yeah. And so if you were thinking about in a number, the number is 630, that needs to be collected, that's been a tax holiday. If you're thinking about a number that you would want to remove from that, do you have a sense of?
Oh, I mean, the,
Just the old bridge?
no, the sewer treatment increase, the
RDKB.
yeah, the RDKB increase,
Oh.
not the air.
Oh,
Whatever we can do to bring our portion down, knowing that our residents have to pay
that one is, you can't get away.
No, I
with it.
understand that, but if we can lower what we are
Yes,
asking of
yes.
people,
Yeah,
yeah, from the city, from the 4%, if we
Right.
are able to lower that, so.
my apologies, I
That's okay.
misunderstood there, sorry. Let's just see what we can do here. Well, what I would say is this, just even going back to the slides that were in the package. If you were looking at the effect on that average single family dwelling home, that's kind of what one of the challenges, of course, is that if you say you didn't pay the bridge, then you are going to basically save our taxpayer by saying, okay, we're not gonna increase by that amount. It would be, say, that 100,000 would be around, let's say, point 0.6. So sort of being like 4, it'd be 3.4. Okay, so if we did that, then you would be looking at probably around $4 to $5 on that. So that's what the effect would be. So instead of having, on the average single family dwelling, instead of it going up $41, and again, netting between the two would be 36. So you would be at 32. So that would be sort of the effect that you're looking at in making the change. So it's not a huge amount on 100,000, and it is I think you know, a portion of goodwill towards understanding what's happening with our community. But I also, and that's an area where I think that council could be comfortable taking it, but if you start to kind of pull into what is the operations for the city to kind of lower what we need to do what our regular services, that's where things get a bit trickier, because now you're sort of, yes, you're funding increases at the regional district, you're helping them almost from not, you know, again, surgery plan is just its animal by itself, like it's just one that's coming and it has to be done. And I would say to you that like Nelson is doing their best they have to upgrade their surgery plan next number of years, and so they are trying to put money away in their reserve, but their money they have in the reserve is no way going to touch the 90 or $100 million cost that's coming for them when it finally comes and goes. So sometimes you look around, it's like, you're getting an upgrade now, it's going to last for a long period of time. And that's just why, even in them trying to do this and lower the cost, is the fact that they didn't just say, well, let's increase the taxes and pay for it. They went and rolled over 30 years. Now, again, the debt interest on that is gonna be significant, but that is sort of spreading out that cost over, you know, a generation and a half kind of thing, so. I don't know if that helps you, but just mathematically, so if you were to lower that by about $100, you would be sitting at between municipal and property tax and debt tax, you would drop from $36 to about 31 or 32.
And then if there's, assuming that the RDKB, the 33% increase, that will level out, I can't set being an every year
Yeah,
thing. If we're able to use any of the supplemental from, are we able to use any of that for supporting the?
the regional district?
No, you, you're talking about with everything at the audit right now, that we're looking at a surplus.
Yes,
The revenue,
yes.
could we use any of that to offset?
Now in the current year's taxation?
Yeah.
Yeah, again, would be dangerous, that would be a place where you maybe wanna put it against that hit that we've got from the one-time recovery.
Okay.
Right, that would be a place,
Okay.
because that's not something that's
Right.
gonna carry on.
Gotcha.
Right, so I would wanna kind of keep our current services whole, and if
Okay.
you start pulling away from them, then that's where some of the risk.
Okay, so if I hear you correctly.
Yes.
If we don't put into the bridge
Right.
fund, it will take taxes down about like 0.4% or 0.6% maybe.
I'm saying,
Yeah.
I'm saying from 4 to about 3.4.
Okay. Okay, and then the surplus from revenue intake can't apply to this year's, but could apply to the one time, the RDKB year. Okay.
Councillor
Well,
Cashel.
I'm just trying, just to clarity on Councillor Martin's comment. It's the $89.
Yes.
That or $630,000 tax recovery.
Yeah.
That I'd like to see focused on. I know, Councillor Best, I appreciate what you're saying with the regional district and the bridge, 100,000. But I think, is there any way, and again, maybe you explained it, maybe I got lost here in the weeds or the details of taking some surplus that we currently have and doing any kind of restructuring to tackle that $630,000. I think the taxpayers would be very, very pleased if we could show that, yeah, there was an error made and that's been addressed, and we don't need to go over that, but is there any way we can mitigate that?
Yep.
That would be the focus that I'd like.
Yeah, that's what the surplus could be.
And so we're.
Well, you're talking like next year for this.
No,
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 this
I know
year,
we
this
were saying
year.
it.
It's a surplus.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Audit's
that's,
not
I'm
done
just
yet.
trying to, for clarity here, for me, it's not so much dealing with what the RDKB tax rate is,
Right.
because I mean, that's kind of a separate animal.
Agreed,
Is this, can we tackle that?
yes.
Maybe we've already answered that question, but I just need clarity for my own.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct, and so that would be sort of your biggest bang for your buck, in the sense that it doesn't affect things going forward.
Mhm.
It is kind of saying, hey, we've taxed, we've had some success because we've had some revenues and interest income, we're gonna use a portion of that to take that hit down. So like, for example, instead of being at, you know, you take a couple $100,000 off that 630, and all I would need is as a resolution from council to say, you know, lower that amount by X, because that's run by the auditor, so I can't just
Yeah,
go
of
do that
course.
by myself. But if you're like, hey, because right now it's sitting as accounts receivable. And so if you're saying we're gonna write down that account, you know, council directs staff to write down that receivable by X. And then that would have a direct effect on the taxpayer.
This,
But also remembering that this is combined, so it's not all residential, that's part of it, so I can't just sort of pull in like, hey, like just, like, don't collect from the residential, so if we do this gives everyone a break to all taxpayers. Like, major industry, residential, business, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
You need a motion for that?
I would need a motion, yes.
You wanna make that motion, Counselor?
Can you please yeah, that wording, the write down,
Yeah, right off. Yeah.
write off,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. That would
The
guess.
council directs staff to write off.
Yeah. That portion, I get, I would need a number sort of thing, like, do you wanna do 50%, do you wanna do?
Whatever the surplus is, can we not use that? Is it up?
Well, I mean, again, I mean, I wouldn't be too worried about that per se. Again, the water fund was better, so, when we had budgeted before, we could say, and some of this will come back, I think, or will come back on, when we talk on the 14th, because we'll be talking a whole budget, but part of it is if we're gonna have surplus, if you want me to allocate it towards that, I can certainly do that. I guess what I would say right now is probably your best bet is,
You say a surplus up to a maximum of 630.
well, one of the challenges is that, and again, we didn't say at the time we did the budget in 2024, but what we did budget, it was 650 going into water. Now, water's had some better revenues and lesser expenses, so to be at that same number that you guys were looking at, you could probably be a bit less. But I also know that we've got some other pressures coming, and so I wouldn't necessarily want to be using all of the surplus, because it may affect us in a different way. So.
There it is, Ms. Buckland, there's your motion.
That's clear as mud.
If we said, that council directs staff to review a write-off of the 630,000 of our DKB 2023 tax recovery and bring it back to the April 14th meeting. And the reason I would ask for that, because I'm also hoping for a motion that if you are okay with doing that, that I can get some direction so that I can kind of complete the budget document and present on the 14th. So if you're like, yeah, I'm comfortable with 4 or something under 4, that would be some direction that I would need so that I can get all of that sort of piece sort of done. So it sounds to me like we've got kind of two things going on. One is like, hey, we want to be able to support our taxpayers and lower that oversight in 2023, which will be, has a huge benefit to our taxpayers. But we recognize that RDKB is their own tax increase and we need our own tax increase for our operations. So using what good results we had in 2024 to try to take the pressure off of 2025 on that and sort of look at that tax increase in that 4-ish range. That's the one thing I'm hoping for.
For clarification, I currently have a motion on the floor that reads that council directs staff to review a write-off of the $630,000 RDKB tax recovery and bring the funds back to the April 14th, 2025 council meeting for further discussion.
And approval.
Or just for approval.
Yep.
Mhm.
You can just bring the number, you don't need to bring all the funds.
So that is the motion on the floor currently.
Okay. And Council Martin is making that motion. Is there a seconder, please? Thank you. All those in favor? That was carried.
And
Yeah, and so if you would be so willing to, and again, understanding, and we think that we couched that one, Gia Butler, I think it was, that, it's a 4%, I think we were looking for, but I don't know, put words in council's mouth sort of thing, so.
yeah, so the other thing that staff requires through the chair before we end this meeting tonight is we do need some direction around that 4%, if that is what you would like us to include into the 5-year financial plan and the budget. Is that 4% level so that we can move forward and have something for you affirmative at the next meeting?
Counselor Hanson?
I'm just seeking clarification. Once we have that, you will represent that, but if in the meantime, when we have public consultation, when we go to vote for that at our approval process
Right.
for a bylaw for that,
Are you talking about the tax increase? Yes.
yes, we can revisit that
You
at
certainly
that
can,
time,
yeah.
if that turns out that we still don't like what the numbers look like.
Yeah.
We still have a whole bylaw to adopt.
Yes, and multiple readings.
Yes, but I would like some direction. If
I would make a
council's-
motion that the 4%, you know, we've seen the charts, it gives us a $12,000 surplus. I don't want any kind of a rate that's gonna give us, you know, a deficit at the end of the year. So for me, I think 4%, looking at what's happening provincially. It's, you know, I know there's gonna be a lot of constituents and taxpayers that are not gonna like the 4%, but I think it's fair. And I think that he presented substantial supporting data to make that a reasonable request. So I'll make a 4% motion.
Tracy?
Your worship through council, we also need to set the public consultation date, and I believe the date was April 14th that you were going to
I
do
could
it,
present
so
it, yeah.
my suggestion for a motion would be that council direct staff to proceed with drafting the 2025 tax rate bylaw to reflect a 4% tax increase, and further that council direct staff to proceed with public consultation in accordance with the community charter section 166 prior to presenting the 25-29 financial plan bylaw for consideration and the required readings at the April 14th, 2025 council meeting.
Okay, Counselor Cashel, you move.
I will make that motion if I.
Okay.
if I can do so.
Thank you.
Sorry, I had a question.
Please.
Is 6 days notice enough for the public to be there to provide thoughtful input to?
Well, it just doesn't,
Consultation, like
it
what
doesn't,
is-
yeah, it doesn't end there, right?
Okay.
So that's the part of opening up, being able to present, you know, it'll be on YouTube, people can watch the presentation, which they did, like they did last year. We didn't get any comments back. This year probably different, but especially with the increase in what's happening with RDKB taxes and that sort of thing.
Counselor Martin?
Through the chair, just Councilor Benson mentioned the Old Bridge money. Did we table that one already?
Well, based on if you were going with
That one?
4%,
Okay.
then you wouldn't, that there is some wiggle room there to make those changes, as you guys had noted.
Okay. So, is there someone to second Counselor Cashal's motion? Counselor Butler, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay. Did you want that noted?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. And that was carried.
And just to be clear, so this isn't end all be all,
Yeah,
right?
no.
Okay, yes, okay, sir.
Okay. Well, if there's no other comments or questions, I guess the motion is to adjourn. Thank you, Councilor Martin. All those in favor? That was carried. Thank you. Thank you, guys. That was a lot of really good discussion. Good
Good job,
information.
Colin.
Hmm?